What is something that you're for sure the US government is hiding from us? This was a good question. I guess I would answer that they are hiding a double standard. What I mean is, they talk about cutting services that our tax dollars would pay for and have paid for, such as Social Security and Medicare. There is a very real discussion about raising the age of retirement. I've heard from the government economists, because I'm very much into economics, that it's impossible to fund a single-payer health insurance which would cover every man, woman and child getting free health care. But, the upper tier of our government, such as Congress, the President, Supreme Court, etc., get these services for free. Even with the government shutdown that was looming and could be again coming up in 45 days, Congress, the President, and the courts are unaffected by any of that. They will still get paid. So why? Why did they get services? In fact, their paychecks are not taxable. Think about that. Again. Why? I thought we are a country, a freedom, and where everyone was equal. Just how far the US went to destroy communism. The project to destroy communism is probably the largest single undertaking a nation-state has ever embarked upon. It took nothing short than biblical amounts of wealth, manpower, energy, and control of much of the entire world as possible, and undermining the parts you could not control to even make this happen. We're all aware of the big sweeping policies that the Americans did to kill communism in the crib. The Bretton Woods Treaty, containment, the various wars they fought, the social policies, the Navy, the globalism, all of these things are quite literally the pillars of our modern society, and it was all primarily done for one reason only. If all the things we know about are literally not just era-defining events, but defining events in humanity's progression as a whole, just imagine what sort of other stuff went under the radar. The only reason the Europe is in the position they're in today is because the Americans looked at how much it would cost to rebuild it and said, is that less than communism? Okay, sign the check. All the NATO alliances originally started as essentially a bribe. Trillions of dollars was spent, and the lives of billions of people were altered to eliminate the communist threat. We may never see a national concerted effort to accomplish a single goal on this grand scale again. I really want to know the nitty-gritty. If it took nothing short of altering the world for a century, imagine how many stories and conspiracies are being hushed up in the name of that end. Flight 93 was shot down by the military, and the heroes taking down the plane was propaganda to rally nationalism to support going to war. The flight was in the air well after we knew the towers were terrorist attacks, flights had been grounded, and it was reported the plane was on a path for DC and not responding to traffic control. Fighter jets were already scrambled. The debris was spread over a large area with no crater. There were several reports on the day of in the aftermath, with eyewitnesses reporting seeing a fighter jet tailing a low-flying plane airliner. Then the hero's story started and was never mentioned again. I'd actually be disappointed if the military didn't shoot it down. They had plenty of time to do so and knew what was happening at that point, and to allow it to go unchecked would be a major failure on the military's part. The truth of UFOs/WAP. It's been stigmatized and obfuscated for 70+ years. I believe there are multiple facets at play. The truth is going to be ontologically shocking for the majority of the populace, and the government doesn't believe we're prepared to handle the truth. The technology, potentially zero-point/free energy, is so exotic and world-changing that it could threaten economic collapse. Similarly, the technology could possibly be exploited and abused by bad actors and enemies of the state. On that same note, they may not want us to know how much they've invested in and have used the technology to develop weapons systems and other military projects, which would lead to even further public distrust. It's clear at this point that the government has acknowledged the existence of WAP and that the phenomenon is indeed real, but they continue to avoid transparency and disclosure for fear of the outcome it may have on society. But it should not be their decision to make. We should be allowed to know the truth and be given the free will to deal with that truth however we may. It may break down the walls of some of our societal paradigms, but it may also help to unite us in ways we can't yet comprehend. As a moderator of r/UFOs, with millions of members and an ever-growing population, I think it's clear that people just want to know the truth and be allowed to make their own decisions. This topic is no longer niche, and should no longer be stigmatized. It is the most important truth of our lifetime, and perhaps the most important and significant truth in humanity's history. We may not be alone. And the reality of their origin may be stranger and more incomprehensible than we could have imagined. Literally everything. Why would the most powerful government in the world actively release all criminal activities they are involved in? When people say that USA is the greatest country in the world, they have zero idea how many years of arduous propaganda it took to get here. They own every facet of your life, from media conglomerates to hospitals to social media. Anytime someone provides evidence of foul play, they are labeled a conspiracy theorist. As a non-American, I think it's insulting to human development to create two sides and then force humans to pick. The choice is not real and has no impact on a global scale. They ask if you want pizza or hot dogs. Then you find out both are covered in shit. But you have to choose. And because your family grew up eating shitty hot dogs, you must carry on the family lineage by eating shit. Then smile and argue over whose shit smells less. The WAP Black programs. There is over $1 trillion unaccounted for in the last 5 failed audits for the DoD. In 2022, the DoD was audited its 5th consecutive time. 61% of its entire budget was unaccounted for. How is this not a bigger issue to our country? Its total budget was $3.5 trillion in assets. The money went into all these black programs in the Department of Defense. Ranging from things like parapsychology, to WAPs to anti-gravity to secret weapons, etc., anything that would be considered paranormal or fringe was kept secret out of fear of funding being cut, paranoia, fear of other military competition, or an arms race. But they had a couple breakthroughs in these areas of study and guessing, and needed a crazy amount of money. Maybe the ability of these programs to stay in the dark has something to do with these breakthroughs giving them more political power or influence. If you don't believe me or think this topic is bullshit, feel free to ask questions. I don't think these things are aliens or ETs. We just don't know what they are, but they're there. Whether you believe in WAPs or not, you have to admit that we should address the audit and acknowledge the whistleblowers. They fear for their lives, have nothing to gain from coming forward. You also should admit that there's a huge stigma around the subject. All scientists should learn about the manufactured aspect of the stigma. That opened up my worldview and made me realize that there's something true to this phenomenon. I've been studying this subject for years and have gone from skeptic to believer very gradually. I don't want to believe this is true. It's very hard to go on with my mundane life knowing that I can see a piece of the big picture. We don't know anything about this subject. The stigma makes even the most respected scientists completely ignore and dismiss the entire subject altogether. That is not a very scientific or logical way to look at the world. It seems to me like, historically, we've always had this false confidence that we've been at the apex of human knowledge until the next breakthrough, and so on and so forth. The fool says he knows everything. The wise man admits to knowing nothing. Let's not be the adults in the room. Let's look at the world with a childlike, unbiased perspective.